Wholeness and Balance Vibrations family. I trust everyone is well. Today we're actually going to start off by doing a sound check really briefly just to make sure that the levels are good. If you can hear this message and it's coming through clearly, you can just respond in the chat and let us know it's coming through loud and clear, or if we need to put a little bit more volume on it. Thank you so much for joining. Of course, here we are on Sunday. This is episode 4 of the Secret Energy podcast, where we look to dig deeply into the metaphysical aspects of our lives and our existence, but also merge all of the bodies, mental, physical, and spiritual, into one, to remove all division that is plaguing our consciousness, the nemesis of existence, and to come into a greater alignment with ourselves and our message, and the energy in which we are continuously spreading to others. So important. All right, so everybody's saying I'm loud and clear, so let me go ahead and get this camera booted up. Let me just see where I'm at since last week with the questions, and I'm going to go ahead and get started after I locate that spot. Thank you so much again for tuning in. I see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces. Thanks so much for joining in, and also even sharing this beautiful message with others that you feel will be inspired by what we have to offer. And we're headlong into 2019, so this means that we're facing the end of the year here. It all goes by so fast, right? And this is why it's also so important for us to get the most out of our existence, because time in itself is finite, meaning that you have this space now to do as you wish. And you have so many mentors, you have so much encouragement, you have so many things to actually ingest that'll benefit your soul throughout your existences. You know, why focus on the things that are not going to do that? So let me find that spot and then we'll get started. Oof, okay. All right, it looks like we've covered a lot. We for sure have really dived into quite a few of these metaphysical questions over the last 3 shows. It's been truly amazing to just be able to open up a space that can address this type of topics. And I do want to say, you know, for the record, you know, I do my best. You know, a lot of this stuff, it's a paradox anyway. So no matter how you answer the question, it could be seen as, you know, not exactly the answer that somebody was looking for. And so with that, you know, again, we just do our best and try to deliver a very clear and sound message. But the nature of this reality literally is paradoxical. So sometimes what we're saying may apply to some and may not apply to others. So there's always a reminder to take what benefits you and then leave the rest. This is your metaphysical smorgasbord. You know, you can definitely come in and get all you can eat. And also you can discard all that you can purge. So that's what's up. Okay. I'm still looking for that fine spot. Just give me one quick second. There was a specific place that we left off, and I'm just looking for that start point. Okay, here's one right here. I think this is where it was. We talked about as Kundalini permanent and temporary. Okay, yeah, that looks like where we left off last, for sure. All right. All right, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so before we start, first giving all honor and thanks to the ancestors. That's the most important thing. That's our DNA. You know, everything here is really about memory, if you notice, like memories. If you really think about it, like From the time that you began, it's been about knowing and remembering how to do things. You maybe start off on a blank slate with a few primal instincts. That's like the basic palette. And then you're to color in your life. And a lot of times what you experience between the time you're born and 5 years old begins to dictate the rest of your life, or the lens in which you see the rest of your life. So some of us may have not had such a great time on the planet at that age range. And so we have some deprogramming to do. And that generally means a deep dive. And a deep dive, of course, is when we have to go to even the foundational principles that we've been taught to believe in and start questioning those principles. And of course, that's very uncomfortable because it actually changes the context of what's going on around us. It also puts us, again, not into our comfort zone, and it allows others to begin to challenge us as far as what they think that we are and who we think we are. So most stay normal, basically. They stay the way that they were, and they feel like that's the way they always have to be. But some of us are here. In fact, quite a few of us are actually here to begin to make a new way. We see so many diverse creations. We've also taken example from all the reflections around us, and we see things that we would like to benefit from doing ourselves. And then now it's about how do we get that into play. And unfortunately, conversation is only a part of that, meaning the knowledge itself is still only a part of that. The wisdom itself is what we're looking for, because that's what gives you the application. So despite the nature of the questions, I do my best to actually give you things that you can apply, because I feel like that they're the most valuable. And this is, of course, in this day and time. It's 2019 going on 2020. I always say the movie from the future. And so things are a bit different than 3,000 years ago when, you know, the structure of society was in a totally different order. And even we were probably in a different sub-yuga, or in a different stage of consciousness. And so I try to bring things relevant to what exactly is happening right now, and not just quote all of the masters of ancient times and the philosophers and give something that's really, really verbally pleasant to hear, but actually brings in a bit of disturbance of how we're actually going to apply that into the reality that we're in today. Because again, I see an overall play with the isms, all of the isms and the IDs, of the consciousness, which are very important because they develop identities. However, we have to realize some very, very basic things about especially occultism in relation to the eyeball, okay? And we've talked about the eyeball a little bit. We call it the iris. This is actually the left side of the brain. And the iris, I've started to crack in even more, is what they would call the all-seeing eye. Sometimes they try to make it so mystical. Sometimes they make it just one group of people. Sometimes they try to make it an archon or an overarch. But that's just because they don't know what they're talking about. The reality of this is that the eye to the entire thing is omniscient only in the respect to the physical planes and spiritual planes that actually contain beings that have eyes. But if you notice, you know, I constantly run up on insects all the time. They got that eyeball and they're looking at you. So they got one, you got one. There's even one that's inside of the consciousness. So there's eyeballs everywhere. And if you think about just the reality of looking at something, it can be new. Look at most of our experiences spent with us, like I said, with the memory, trying to actually find new things. And so the eyeball is what generally witnesses new things. And when you think about new things, you also think about kind of things that are alien, meaning that if something is new, the term is it's alien or foreign to you until you get used to it. So I believe 100% this is where the connection with the eyeball and the alien and all this really comes from. And truly, you do have some very mystical things going on in there. But if we get off track and again start accrediting this stuff to all of these external forces, that especially if they're harbingers of our own reality, then we've steered ourselves in the wrong direction. And this, as I've become more and more adept at my knowledge and wisdom and application, and just internally digging into self and feeling self as a cosmos, this is ringing true all around. And it does that also on an etymological level. And this is why I encourage those who have not read the Code to the Matrix to check it out. There may be some things in there that are a bit outdated since the book was written almost 10 years ago. However, there is in itself a key, a key that allows you to begin to tumble the words within your mind and begin to decipher what exactly is going on in the reality, because you can't just change language overnight. However, you also see a lot of puns. And I actually came into one yesterday. We were talking about this word miss, like I miss you. And someone said, hey, do you miss me? And I said, hey, I don't really miss anything or miss anyone. And the remark was, why? Because it was seen almost as if that was kind of cruel or callous. And I said, well, I may feel other terms of endearment, but missing, no, because if I'm going to see you again, then you're not gone. Okay, and I'll say that again. If I'm going to see you again, you're not gone. So there's no reason for me to miss you. Because if you think about this word miss, you'll also realize that it means, like if I say, hey, I'm missing my coat, that means my coat is gone. So for us to miss others is kind of misappropriate because they're still here. They may be back, but there's no reason to miss them. However, that's one surface interpretation of etymology within the English linguistic system. But notice how this same word miss is actually referred to from the feminine nature, like Mrs. Doubtfire, right? That's not a female. Mrs. George, Mrs. Scott, Mrs., Mr. and Mrs. Okay, so the word Mrs. is also seeming to be a reference towards the female. And this is, again, that continuous pun that I see throughout the language that is in itself genderized. I was talking about the other day also how the word manual, and there was one more word I had synced that was all about basically things that give you instruction. Guide. Okay, that was the word. So in this word, you have guy, which is a man, and you have manual, which is a man, as if to say that only men are capable of being guides. And this, again, is what starts to allow you to see the linguistic programming within the language. And when you're aware of that, it starts to unravel things in your own consciousness that may be set up as things that will hinder you in time because they're just not balanced. So, I trust that rings true to those that are etymological whizzes and they love this kind of stuff, but it never ends. Like I've never stopped ciphering words cipher even in the sleep. And this brings me to a greater level of clarity. So for those that just think that I'm like coming up with some of this stuff, I never really come up with anything. What I do is I actually look at the linguistic system. I see the as above, so below nature within the entire reality. And then I find where those connections are, and then I adapt to those connections. But what I don't do is when I find those connections, turn tail and run from them and insist that they do not exist because maybe I've been taught, or maybe I think, or sometimes even maybe I feel like I know that there's another truth. And this is, what happens at times when we depend on our intuition to actually explain to us everything, but our intuition is miscalibrated. There's a lot of conceit that goes on in the I-ness where even when they say, well, someone says, this is what I feel, this is my gut feeling, and then they feel like, okay, well, that's obviously the truth. But if the gut is disembalanced and filthy and has not been cleaned out in a while, then the gut truth is actually probably going to be distorted within itself. And this is just a sober pill that we all have to take as observers and experimenters with the reality that you will make mistakes. And in fact, the whole art of, in itself, experimentation is to actually make mistakes first and then use the mistakes to calibrate to the perfect balance. So if you also, again, think about the idea of an eye, which is the left side of the brain, or a watcher, as it's often called, you can see that the only thing that you would really consistently be watching all the time would be some type of experiment, something that you're actually conducting where you need to monitor it in order to actually see what the results are going to be. And of course, that has lent itself to a zillion different kind of conspiracies around things watching us and things learning from what we're doing and even running us through drills. But truly, you have the same power as every single thing else in this galaxy with that eye. And so you can either observe others observing you. You can either become the observer and start to realize what's happening in this great expanse. As they always say, there's a level up in the consciousness when the observe shifts to the observer. So this is the keys and the pathway to do that. And this is also spooky free, meaning that it doesn't include a lot of the triggers that go along with when you actually speak certain words. So there are many words that we're using now. And as I said, ground to how you interpret things actually comes very similar to, like, let's say, for instance, a system. Like, there's a lot of systems right now that the moment that you start typing in the computer, it starts to auto fill or auto try to get an idea of what you're saying. Okay. And the brain works like this, and it will do that with everything. The moment I start even saying the dog needs to go up the tree, your brain automatically, faster than you can think, and your consciousness faster than you think, starts imagining a dog and imagining a tree. And it has to do this, but it only can do that based on the information that you had before. It actually paints a picture of a dog based on what you had before. And so this also means that even when I challenge concepts like words like Satan, words like Lucifer, also being related to Saturn and Venus, those words, though, they set triggers that actually equate for most people to movies that they've watched that people were involved in these kind of things. And then they start to adapt those ideals into the truths of what I'm talking about in relation to those two archetypes. And then it becomes distorted for them. And this is pretty much the whole of reality at times in this entanglement, where it takes you to have strong discernment and adepthood to be able to actually wean through a lot of this BS, literally, and start really seeing the truth. And even just a side note to that, like, I came across, for whatever reason, this guy, I think his name is Christopher Lee. You know, he plays Saddam Numspar, Dracula, and all these different people in these occult movies. And, you know, you could clearly tell that this guy is involved in that stuff, right? But he has these videos that keep popping up on YouTube of how he says that he's basically not involved in that kind of thing. But then he goes and elaborates on different aspects of it. And he was elaborating on the aspect of him playing this Satanistic role that he was sacrificing these different things inside of a church. And he starts to elaborate on what Satanism really is and how it's a concept to turn every single thing that would be good on its head and upside down. So if the cross is right side up, they turn it upside down. If they're going to do the ritual, they try to find a holy place to actually do it in. Then they desecrate the holy place and all this kind of stuff. And the reality was, this is a very short video, but what I actually was able to glean from this being's consciousness is that even the idea of Satanism itself is actually turned upside down. And this is just, again, a sidebar here, but to show you how it all really works, because they're telling you directly, we turn everything upside down, and we call that Satanism. But what if even the word Satanism is actually their first advent of turning things upside down? Because I believe personally that Satan, the original Satan, if you may, or Sat, was the original founder of the original church, and that old son or that old king or that archetypical father actually was the one that was bringing this certain level of spiritual knowledge, whether that was for better or for worse. Clearly, every being has 2 or 3 different poles, but it's just, again, that act of realizing that now these usurpers have come and created all these buildings and done all these rituals, and now they got all these different backwards churches, and they got all these people believing in this dogma of an external God that's not really real. And to me, that's Satanism. From the title, starting at the title, turning that upside down, meaning that's not what the real title really is, and then going from there. So do you see how what supreme knowledge allows you to do is it allows you to not omit anything, meaning that you actually just see things very clearly, you listen to every single word that's being said, and you don't omit anything. However, what supreme wisdom allows you to do is to not stay in the folly because of the contextual agreements that others, including yourself, may have made. And what that means is that if in society they say it really means this and it doesn't, you have to be at a point where you're ready to actually expand beyond where society has been able to reach. And that's why I always said personally in my own memoirs, if 9 billion people are doing something, but I find within the codes and the keys that it's not what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm not doing it. And that's what's carried me so far. That's what has allowed me to go into all these different vistas of not only intelligence, but also application. And even more importantly, that's what has been able to allow me to be here doing this and giving this message despite the incessant YouTube comments and, you know, the stress of the 16 to 17 hour day, the building of the technologies, especially for our children and things that we need in daily life. And sometimes in not getting, especially the resources resources and the support to do that, and then getting a lot of people playing around. Like I just don't like, especially since this is so serious at times and my time is on the line, the playing around, the fake help, and all the different things where people are just trying to gratify more of their I-ness. When what I want to do is I actually want to train my consciousness to balance itself back out by not only being aware of the collective state of consciousness, but also being aware of how to balance the two, meaning to stop this war that is going on between both sides of the consciousness, i.e. reptile, mammal, light and dark, sun, moon, etc., all of these polarities, and actually stand in between them as a referee. Notice a referee is wearing black and white. The referee is the one that steps in the middle of the two poles, the two sides of the brain wrestling themselves, Cain and Abel, or Jacob down the ladder, the angel wrestling against the flesh, and actually pull them apart and get them to begin to work together. Because if I don't, then I'm going to be locked in this forever in infinite entanglement, which should be, if anything is scary, it would be that. An infinite entanglement of experiencing existence as a separate being only, rather than separate, collective, but a synthesis, merged, which is a realization of when it's a time and a place to use each of those powers for your benefit. So the first thing here that's a question is, what age should a child start meditating and breathing, the breathing techniques? And I'm going to not be as sarcastic today, because I did see a few notes that say, well, people are asking questions and you make fun of them and blah, blah, blah. And I really do be joking, because I don't think that there's any such thing as a bad question. Also, I may have been in this for 10 years, all my life or whatever, but some people may just be getting started. And so what I've done is I've lent myself to, being available for those that are even just getting started on this. But I do like to keep it a little bit more interesting by shooting some comedy in there. But I will try to try not to hurt your feelings. I will try not to hurt your feelings as much when questions are asked that seem kind of obvious, meaning that when questions are asked that actually answer themselves. So I think with this question, a child starts meditating and breathing already. It's really about whether we're taking that child out of the meditation and we're taking that child out of its ability to breathe. And what I mean by that is, from the moment that the child comes out of the womb, truly, that is a very deep meditation that they're in. And there's oftentimes this quiet and stillness about the child. And of course, they're taking their breaths. Now, there is a stage of cognizance where they can start learning techniques. And that cognizance these days is actually happening earlier and earlier in life. Like my daughter now, she's 7 and she knows how to do lots of different things. And that's just because she hears about it all the time. And so truly, it's not only that, like realizing when the child reaches the cognizance and you can start teaching the techniques, but also doing things that will actually keep them from breaking. Basically prevent doing things that break their meditations. Right? Like introducing things that will break their meditation. And this could be, very disturbing music. Sometimes you want to get your music going on. You like it. You need the bass. You need the subs. But then you got this new baby. And then this new baby's also being bombarded by all this. So that could be breaking that child's meditation. Right? And then also with the breathing, it's of course showing by example, because what happens with children is they're into mimicry. That's also the memory and learning things. So if they constantly see you taking the deep breaths and engaging in the breaths, then it's natural for them to actually do that same thing. So it doesn't become something that you're actually teaching them per se. It becomes something that they continuously do, because you're encouraging that, because they're watching you and seeing how you behave. So that's what I'll lend to that. So the next question here is, how do we stop blaming ourselves for using plants to help us reach higher levels of consciousness and not feel like we are bypassing and cheating? Okay, so I'm gonna read this question again because it's a little odd to me. How do we stop blaming ourselves for using plants to help us reach higher levels of consciousness and not feel like we are bypassing and cheating? Okay, so I get what the person is saying. The reality to this is that if you let others dictate to you what is right and what is wrong in respect to what you feel you should be doing, and also accepting blame from others, you have to be on point with this. Obviously there's constructive criticism. Obviously there's guides and mentors, but there's also that aspect of you that is you, that you have to always say, well, this is what I want to do. And if it's something that you want to do, I would uninstall things that say you're not supposed to do that, because then you're never going to get to the full completion of whatever you're doing. I find in life that anything that you engage in, especially for a prolonged period of time, you eventually get tired of doing it. And so anything that you're saying, oh, that's something that I want to do, and you feel like you want to do it, it's best to actually explore that within yourself to finally get to the point where you're saying, okay, I did that. Let me move on to a more refined aspect of it. So in this case, I don't think one should blame themselves for utilizing things in the reality to allow them to peer into other aspects of their consciousness. I don't think that I think that in one side of the consciousness, mainly the I-ness, it doesn't really want to experience the totality. So it's naturally going to begin to reject things that actually push it into that collective aspects of things. But also, just like the referee needs to jump in sometimes, you get some that are actually so deep into the collective that they've actually lost the identity of truly who they are as far as what they're here to do with their uniqueness. And that could actually be equally as dangerous, because then what you get is you get this massive group, which is functioning as a collective, great. But the issue with collectives, because there are, is that there's little growth. There's little new things happening in the collective. Everything feels like it has already gained everything that it needs and that there's nothing else to add to it. That is, again, the pros or the cons of being actually in a collective. So if you can imagine in a group, and they talk about this, that would happen in the tribal setting quite often, that in the tribal setting, that you would seldom see anything new. Everybody was into the old custom. The custom was practiced at this time of the week. And also, you can even witness many of these cultures. They actually have a holiday almost for every single day of the week and every single month of the year and every single year and every 5 years and 6 years. And this puts you into this cyclic behavior where, just like a collective is, it's very much like a circle where you never can really break out of that circle. It's just like there's no new innovations, as if there's nothing new. And this means that every being there actually stays in that type of consciousness and has a slower amount of growth. Now, again, the benefits of this is everything has been tried and tested. So generally you don't run into things that nobody has seen before. But again, the drawbacks of this is also not being able to really explore and to gain new levels of awareness to enhance or synthesize things that may have been been concrete before. And that's what, so this is also why you would want to have a firm grip and a strong grasp on both sides of your consciousness, so that you can understand if you're doing one of those in the extreme level. As I said, you are the arbitrator, you are the referee. So you got to be the one in there saying, how am I keeping the balance here? So that's what I have to lend to that, instead of feeling like you're cheating and, all this. Just think about also that if you stop doing it with this, to show you that it's a condition of the mind, if you stop doing it with this idea about the plants and reaching higher states of consciousness and people think you're cheating, etc., and you just stop doing that, something else is going to arrive. This is how you'll know that it's the condition of the consciousness. Now it's going to be that you're driving this car and this car has oil and you should really go over to electric. Okay. So then you may, go extenuously to try to get rid of your car. Now you bought this electric vehicle and now you feel like you got that out of the way and you're like, let me listen to a video. And then you listen to a video on somebody saying it's about looking at videos and watching liquid crystal displays and how that burns out your face and burns out your eyes and sends all this retina electromagnetic frequencies at you. And then so you turn that off. Okay, I'm gonna turn that off. All right, I'm not okay. So I'm doing that. I'm not doing that anymore. I just got to get something to eat. Then you open the refrigerator and it begins again. And this kind of life, which I actually think is a part of the bigger conspiracy to our existence, that somehow we've been locked into this thing that wants to judge us consistently as not worthy. And this actually affects our vibrational frequency. So we live less long. We don't live as long. And we're not as excited about the existence and the reality, especially like when we're children, we're not thinking about any of this stuff. And you're almost like in this straitjacket. So if you really adhere to every single thing that is being said, you can go nowhere, you can eat nothing, you can say nothing, you can talk to no one, and it becomes really miserable. And if that's what consciousness or supra consciousness is, I'm not in. And I can boldly say that to anyone or anything around me. I don't want to be involved, because that to me, does not feel like that I'm actually expanding and I'm actually becoming more of a grander being. And I think that many will agree that same way. I'm sure there'll be a percentage that don't, and they'll thumbs down the video. But hey, I just have to be truthful with myself, especially these days, and in the maximum awareness that time is fleeting and that you need to get to the completion of many of these goals. So that way you can actually set a firm foundation and start building from there. But if it's always shaky, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I really want to be with her. I don't really want to know. And if I'm going to have children, I don't really want to know if I want to start a company. I don't really know if I should start a bank account. I don't really think I need an ID. I don't even know if I should buy this car. If your foundation looks like that, you cannot build anything. And even more importantly, you can't actually put anyone else on that foundation, because the moment, have you ever seen somebody try to carry something on an unbalanced foundation, and what happens? They either break down, they fall, all those kind of things. So you have to be able to actually give yourself also a visual of what is happening inside of your consciousness. And that visual oftentimes give you the awareness of if you're going to be able to continuously use such principles. So let me check the chat here real quick and see if, see what's happening. All right. So it looks like everybody is in good stages. I'm not going to read too much in there. Whoa, watch that chat box. That chat box is, whoo, lots of consciousness is moving through there. So, okay, so this next question is that I'm an empath, and I can sense the soulless beings that I encounter, but it comes across most of the time as disgust for them. I feel very separate from them. How is the experience with themselves? Okay, this is interesting. When we say soulless beings, and this is what we were talking about before in relation to these new concepts that come along, and then everybody jumps onto these concepts, and then because they seem to fit something that we're experiencing, we then give them this title, soulless. But the interesting part about this is what is the soul? I think we talked about this last week, is the soul is the energy that fills everything. So there's a soul in plastic. And if you want to argue about that, then you're arguing against nature, because plastic comes from nature. And so every single thing here contains an element of the energy and an aspect of the energy, and is completely filled with the energy. Now, of course, the grades, the qualities, the amounts, and all that, you can leave that up to the alchemists in order to determine what are the measures and things with that. But just to say that it has none at all, that's an extreme. And once one forms a foundation on something like that, there are soulless beings. Now, there are beings that don't contain as much soul, but there are no beings that don't have any soul. And then again, when you're even saying soul, maybe you're thinking about empathy, not so much as a soul. And that's what, in Sanskrit at least, they do really well at separating all of these things. In English, they do a horrible job because they make one word to account for everything. So you could say, well, I come across unempathic beings that don't care about others. That means beings that may be tied more into the reptilian aspect of the consciousness, which is one side of the brain. So they're into the I-ness themselves, and they don't really care about the collective and the whole mammalian warmth and all that kind of stuff. And so they lack empathy in that way. And when you kind of try to send a beacon out to them or ping them, they're like, get out of here with that. I don't want to be loved. I don't want to be held. Look at you. You look stupid, blah, 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 blah. And then that's the energy that you're feeling. But to actually say that they're soulless, then that's an incorrect interpretation of it. So how do people that don't have empathy fit in with the experience of self? That's the part of self where one has not gained empathy yet. Meaning that it's almost as if that, especially in the tribal setting, things like empathy are trained or honed in over generations. That's why you generally have shamans, or you generally have medicine women and men that actually come from long lineages of their fathers and their fathers' fathers, and then also in the mothers and mothers' mothers, and the tribe even electing them to be able to do these things because they can do stuff like, as what we called as the pinnacle, leading us into the wild hunt, meaning giving us the ability to actually be able to sustain ourselves by guiding us to the things that actually nourish us to completion. So this is a very important aspect of something that we need to remember, is that not everybody has empathy, because many are just beginning on this journey and haven't had the pleasure yet of being involved in a mindful spectrum where empathy is used as a tool in order to be able to be more harmonic with those that are around them. So 1-strand DNA versus 2-strand, 3-strand, 4-strand, then we keep moving up the ladder of lights from there. But again, to say that they're soulless is a grave mistake, because then you would actually then insist that there's some things that can't contain a soul. And this gets you going in the wrong direction. So the next question here is, aren't these numbers arbitrary? Do we rerun program routes by saying I'm this number? Do we even get the free of the Arabic number system if we get free of the Arabic number system if we think in those terms? The reality is that the interesting part about numbers is that numbers are not something that you have to necessarily be trained or taught. Numbers actually come across as an embedded way of us functioning. So if I say 1, 2, 3, 4, everybody's second digit, like whatever they're saying when they're counting, because counting becomes like something we do early on in the game. Like you have 2 bottles, not 1. You have 5 rocks here. You have 1 mother. So those archetypical numbers are not necessarily programs and intents to things that are going to harm you. They're actually guidelines to how the sequence of the cosmos even moves. So I don't think personally that you would be rerunning any kind of program that would be detrimental to the consciousness, seeing that, of course, even the language that we're using is a program. So if we start going at, again, the things that make up the foundation, things that have been tried true for thousands of years to even how our ancestors are functioning, and then all of a sudden we want to rip that out of the way because of a misconception that may be the evil one, what then happens is we actually rob ourselves from having the ability to come into direct alignment with who we truly are. So it's like, if I remove all your cognizance, I remove your language, I remove your numbers, I remove your history, and I remove your past, I remove your presence, I remove all of these different things, which can be deemed by one as not being beneficial for them. This is the new trend, right? What are you left with? Right? What are you really left with? You're left with nothing. So I think that what we have to do is we have to figure out how these things are serving us. And that's why they say in that scripture, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. Really, in the original text, what this basically means is that there's no way that a weapon can be created against an adept mind, because an adept mind can see everything, even poison, as being useful in some way, shape, or form. And the adept knows how to put that into their mind in the proper place in order to actually benefit from it. So thus, those weapons cannot be used directly as weapons against the adept, because everything has its place. So with this being said, I don't think that we're in a position to be trying to remove something that is the foundation to how our consciousness has functioned throughout the cosmos for a countless period of time, especially if we don't know the full rigging of it, meaning that most don't know the real connection between the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 9, and how they stand for the archetypes and the flopping, if you may, or the procession of how we come into existence. And also even combinations of numbers bring us back into that same equation. So for the adept, he's not throwing out, or she's not throwing out the numbers, because they actually become the integers of the archetype in which they measure reality as you know it. And because you have to function inside and outside of time, inside and outside of reality, or reality and actuality, you have to function in both of those spaces. You're going to need those metrics. But again, what I will say, though, is that if there's a proper misunderstanding about the numbers, like mainly how that 2 is a product of what happened with 1, 3 is a product of what happened with 2, but basically being able to bridge in between these numbers rather than saying 1 is that by itself, here's 2, that by itself, and now realizing how they connect and how they morph into each other, then you would, of course, then miss the natural progression of what exactly is going on around us in nature. So to remove numbers would then, from our consciousness and what they truly mean, would be to remove natures. And that's why I was saying math is ma'at. And the lowest form, and this again is something that you have to take with this, the lowest form and use of numbers is counting. So to use numbers for things like money, I got $100, I got $1,000, I got 50 likes and 1,000 likes. That's the lowest form that numbers can be used, and actually was always basically, it was always, if you had a teacher and a master in the old times, they encouraged you not to use numbers for counting. It was seen to debase the number. They would want you to learn numbers from an archetypical level because that was the highest use. So I trust that that makes sense. So the next question here is when in the 0 point field, where you are feeling the energy of your body like a water, what are the best ways to use the energy to manifest your reality? And I spoke on this before about when you enter an energy field, especially a 0 point field, if you can reach that space, you've only been able to reach that space because you've disengaged the part of the consciousness that's like, did I reach 0 point yet? Oh, I feel something. I feel it. It feels good. Because the moment that you interject into that kind of space, it's almost like you're throwing you're putting a stick in the spoke, and now the spoke is going to lock up, and then you're going to trip. So if you're trying to then say that, how do I use that kind of energy to manifest this particular part of my reality? And then you try to use that to project what kind of reality you want to see next. This is also incorrect because you wouldn't be able to visualize the reality that you want to see next and then stay in a 0 point field. And I guess for me, I couldn't. So what I resolved from the whole thing is that I should just build energy. Because energy is vibration, energy is perfection in itself, because it'll allow you to stand up like a top. So you know how when you're spinning a top and it starts to go, really, really fast, it stands up straighter. And in that, every single thing that is in that field is also reflecting the state of that top. So instead of saying, okay, I need to go and meditate because I'm trying to get this car or this house or this job or this certain stage of consciousness or whatever, it's better to just go into the meditation and just reach the field and then allow yourself to get more familiar with the energy, but not in a stage of like, this is what I need to do with the energy, because the energy itself is so hypersentient and so quantum. It is basically the vessel of fuel or receptacle that is used for manifestations that reflect the kind of energy that you're bringing in. And this is, of course, why there are others that practice in different kind of arts that bring in chaotic energies, and then they use that energy for chaotic actions. Versus if you actually get into this stage, you balance the energy, and then you stay in that field, everything that's going to come forth from that manifestation is going to be a reflection of the kind of energy that was cultivated. So what I'm saying is there's virtually no need, because the mind does that enough subconsciously anyway. Once you come out of the meditation, it does gander off into what exactly it wants to experience and what it feels like is the most ideal. So the consciousness will actually synthesize that and then start to really create that future and that present for you. But if it has no fuel, which is what you're predominantly getting from the 0 point field, is unidentified fuel, a panacea, a fuel that can actually be used to propel anything. And that's really what you want to do with the energy is. And that's the process. So build the energy. And the easiest way to do that is by not thinking of anything and then having a large repository for it. So that way, when your consciousness has now shaped up a synthesis of what it feels like you should experience next, it has no issue with actually taking you into that stage, because it has the fuel in order to get there. So we're going to keep going through this. We're almost an hour in. We're going to have an hour and a half today, and then we're going to adjourn promptly, just because there's an infinite amount of questions, but we do get through as many as we can. So the next question is, how do you personally keep from being hooked by negative reactions? And let me bring this down here so I don't have to keep looking up. Maybe that helps. That kind of helps my brain. Okay, let's see here. How do you personally keep from being hooked by negative reactions? I would say personally, practice, of course, and then also studying NLP. There are masters in every category. Like some have doctor in front of their name, some have psychologists in front of their name, and some have occultists behind their name. And so really the reality here is that we're in this collective, and that's why it's most important to really stop the judgments and the blame games and all this kind of stuff, because that can actually prevent you from expanding and learning. So you can see somebody that doesn't necessarily fit the demographic that you like and turn off their message because you feel like, oh, they can't know the truth because they're X. And then that's your stigma. That's a real problem. But if you actually are starting to realize that all is self, and you do that energetically, you're then attracted to the information, even if it's in a finite way, of the answer it is that you seek. That's what's been happening for me. The more vast I am about realizing that all of these are a part of my consciousness, i.e. all is self, the more that I'm able to be led to information that actually is like, wow, I think that this more has to do with what we're experiencing in the metaphysical field than even what people call metaphysics. And in this case, NLP is one of those things, actually seeing how the consciousness begins to actually form all sorts of ideas based on different conditions that has been put in. And we've talked about this a little bit in ambassador training. Ambassador training, by the way, is always off the chain. It's always something new coming through because it's co-creative. If you want to join, I definitely recommend that you jump in if you can join. But we've been talking about hypnosis recently and just how everyone is under a stage of hypnosis or trance, whether they know it or not, because we do it to ourselves. It's being done to us, from the TV and products being sold to us. And it's also being done to us on a bigger level that is not even considered as a product. And this is when someone's trying to sell you a nation, or when someone's trying to sell you a person like a president, or when someone is trying to sell you an ideal or idea like what you mean being in a certain skin color, or all of those things are contexts that must be hypnotically suggested to those that have inherited those dispositions. So because of that, it's about realizing that anybody that's hypnotized, though, is not going to know that they're hypnotized, that's going to be the number one trait that everyone hypnotized is going to exhibit, is that they're going to deny that they're actually in some type of hypnosis. And that's why I was saying that what Alcohol Anonymous really is actually the laws of the original Illuminati. And that the A period, period, A period, period, which is a symbol of the Illuminati, is actually the symbol of Alcohol Anonymous. And when you look at the principles, you just strip away the idea that you're just getting rid of an alcohol addiction, and you just use the principles to see that this is how you remove any kind of habits or addictions or stagnant points. Then you actually will become illuminated off that kind of knowledge. And the beginning of it, and that's why it's so effective, but again, it's compartmentalized. It becomes effective because the beginning of it says what? That you first have to admit it. Because if you don't admit it, then it never really occurs to you. So the group of covert hypnosis and all the different things that you see going on in the reality where hypnosis is used, it functions on that key fundamental, and that's to boast up a person's I-ness or pride or ego to make them feel like that this couldn't happen to them, and then to proficiently do it to them and they'll never would see it. And so because of that, it's important to actually study that, study neurolinguistic programming, and actually see how you can begin to remove these impulses, things that happen so fast that you couldn't even catch it, which would then be a negative reaction. And then, of course, there's a little energy siphon. There's a reaffirmation of a stage that you've been actually stuck in, and now you're still stuck in it. And then you actually don't find yourself really cured from it. And that's why I also made a statement the other day about how many people were really actually cured, if you may, from pain, illness, sickness, and different things that they said that they wanted to get over. Did they forget about it? Or is it still deep down there somewhere and just not as prevalent as it used to be? How many times are we able to actually get rid of something completely? And I would argue that we probably never get rid of something completely. We may suppress it. And so to truly be able to get ourselves in the proper state with whatever we experienced, we have to harmonize with it. And the only way we harmonize with something is actually being able to understand where it's coming from and where it's going and where it came from. And that actually takes us to be very courageous and go within ourselves and say, this is what happened to me, and this is the direct result of that. So what was also brought up is how it's easy to manipulate a person that has experienced trauma from a specific, let's say, demographic. Let's say, for instance, I got beat up by, I don't know, Arabian or Arab kid when I was younger, okay? And it was a pretty bad fight. He just totally whooped me. So let's say 15 years later, when someone else comes to me and says, hey, I don't like Arabs, it would be easier for me to say, neither do I, because of the experience that I had when I was younger with that Arab kid. You see what I mean? And so that's a light example. But if you can think of the reality, which I think of even the Western culture actually functions on racism, like most of everything that is produced, even when we were younger, especially when you watch the cartoons and you realize this, is all functioned on this division and racism and all this kind of stuff. So then later on, 10 or 15 years in the future, when something is presented by that same party and says, we don't like this, it's easy for a person to say, I don't either. But now, in having full mastery over your consciousness, you have to be able to wipe all of that stuff clean by harmonizing with it and by recognizing, hey, that's where that thinking is coming from. And it's also a strong generalization because it's never going to be an everything with anything. And then as I start unseating all of that, then it actually starts to bring a much more grander being. And I feel like that if we keep saying, well, I'm going to become activated or I'm going to become enlightened or all of that, that's more of what we're talking about. We're not talking about raising into the sky in a beam of light like a Jesus Christ going into some spaceship. We're talking about actually being such a 360 well-rounded being on the physical plane that you actually do reach contentment, which is feeling great about where you are. And then anything else that you're benefiting from your daily growth, you're doing it in joy, like meaning that it's actually something that is becoming what you feel like is strengthening you, not something that you feel like that you just have to do. Because anything that you feel like you just have to do, even if you keep doing it, it starts developing certain isms and stigmas within the consciousness that don't allow you to truly get the experience that you were looking for from it. So the next question here is, I remember one of your old recordings where you said about that there being 360-degree different parallel realities we're operating on. How do we collapse them into one? And what's that like? Thank you. Okay, so what we're talking about is that obviously, and this is the difference in the states of the consciousness. This is the difference in the sides of the brain, is that one side of the brain is phased into this particular reality, this particular space, this particular identity, while the other one actually has a free-flowing integer. So in this case, I had to explain just recently the difference between linear and non-linear time, because sometimes when that's said, we take it for granted that everybody actually understands what that means. And just to be very clear, linear time is to insist that time is like a straight line, that, you know, the moment that you begin, you start moving in the opposite direction, and that you would never return to that space ever again. Because after all, if something is going infinitely in one direction, it can never return to that space. But time is actually really more of even beyond nonlinear. It's more of like a entanglement. It's more of like knots in itself. And so this means that you take these different passageways then through time, especially based on the bodies that you're using, physical body, mental body, spiritual body, etc. And sometimes you can actually take a left or a right onto something that everybody thinks is straight, and then end up in a totally different part of history and time. And an example of this is that if you start adapting sometimes alchemical principles, you find yourself more of like 3,000 years ago. Alchemy is like having a master's degree in alchemy right now is like having a master's degree as a steam engine engineer. Like there's probably going to be, for most people, so little use for something like that, seeing that we're in 2019. But to the connoisseur, just like if you like steampunk and all that kind of stuff, to the connoisseur, you're probably going to go build motors. You may even develop things that you feel like that you like that run on that same technology. But the reality could think that it progressed way beyond that, even though the same components within everything and how it functions is always exhibited as a mirror across time. So what I'm saying here is that the 360 aspect of the reality is always experienced with the right side of the consciousness, because the moment that you turn on or activate it, however you do it, you can do it through breathing, which brings the hemispheres of the brain in balance and actually allows you to be able to actually push more off into one hemisphere, especially as you become synaptical, or actually more of in the lucid state when the body actually lets go from a conscious mind. It's actually eased. The I-ness is kind of sleep or doing something, and then you start drifting over into that other aspect, and then that's when the 360 field opens. So I don't want to make it seem so complex to do this, but that's for sure where that is located and how to actually access it. The next question here is, how do we become beyond space and time? Okay, and sometimes these are, again, it's almost like a Guardians of the Galaxy movie at times, some of the questions, because we want to do things that if we end up in those spaces, we would probably feel very uncomfortable or maybe even afraid if we actually get into things that, we've somehow cooked up in our consciousness of this is where I should be. But then we find out that the concept itself wasn't founded on really many principles. And this is how, let me explain this. The consciousness is capable of traveling into spaces that you can think about, but are not completed. They're not complete. So this is like, I can be in a dream and I'll be in a world and there'll be certain things that are missing because the projection is not complete. And because it's missing, the whole world is kind of missing certain components, okay? So if we booted up a world that didn't have space and time, there'll be certain things that would actually operate so strange, you wouldn't even be able to navigate the space. And this is because I thought there was a question also, and so I'm answering this question now about what is space and time? And the easiest way to actually interpret what space and time is actually distance. And I've talked about this before heavily in one of my previous conversations, but distance is really space and time. Why? Because when you're moving on from something, let's say I'm moving on even from this moment, I'm creating a distance between this moment and what was going on in the last moment, okay? And then also, if I wanted to go to the last moment, it's going to take me some time to get there, okay? This is space and time. Now, going even deeper, for me to get through space and time or to navigate space and time, it has a lot to do with the kind of vehicle that I'm using as far as how fast that can happen for me. So if I'm using one aspect of my consciousness, I can actually travel through space and time quite rapidly. Give me just a quick moment here. Let me mute some lines. So I can actually travel through space and time quite rapidly versus if I use one of my dense bodies, I may not even be able to make that travel. So space and time is actually what we're creating from the distance of what we have from our last action to another. And even because we're in a collective, others' actions and when they did those actions. So let's say a Nesut-Bit or a pharaoh was in the pyramids doing something at a certain space and time. And now the distance between when he did that and even the mindset that he or she was in when they did that, that is creating the quotient called space and time. So if I use a certain vehicle, and we talked about this of how the body is a time machine, that the true ship, if you're looking for it, you're sitting in it already, and some are just in a crash landed ship. And that if you wanted to travel to the past, that you can actually do that. And your consciousness, especially when you go to sleep, if you have a good grip on the dream space, you can actually travel into that space. And also there's certain substances that give you the ability, if you learn how to train yourself and to stay focused on where you want to go, and then that you can actually get into these different spaces and times, and then you can even make it back here. And these all look like, if you want to know what the visual is, tubes. It looks like these tubes or these cords or these cables or these, what I say, some of them are even knotted together, that you're traveling through in this particular vehicle, these vehicles that you're using, and then you're getting into the essence of what it was like to be in that space. And what gives you, because here's a little bit more on this, once you get to that space, what happens is that you don't necessarily arrive there because you're not actually using that part of the idea of the consciousness that you're calling you. What arrives there is the being that being or that part of you that is capable of seeing through the eye. So everything that has an eye in that room, even from the fly on the wall to the pharaoh themselves, to the animals, the cats, all those different things are things that you would be peering through and experiencing the reality through, because that is the open or the opening or the gateway or the portal into that space. Okay. And this is where a lot of the power really is. And I can't like go step by step and tell you this is exactly how you do it, because it takes honing in many things: diet, intellect, connections and stuff that have to do with the cosmos, empathy, lots of different things that we talk about on the journey of adepthood. But I can give it to you in a very crystal clear way of why you would be able to do that. And that's why they say, oh, eyes are portals. And it's because when you have access to that stage of consciousness, you can see through all of the eyeballs that were present during that time, because the eyeballs are what connect the ends of the tubes. Like them being spheres actually turn into that on a dimensional level into these tubes. And then the tube becomes what you're traveling down, and then you're peering through that eye. And then now you're watching and experiencing the situation that's taking place. So that's how that works. The next question here is, what do you think about Terrence Howard and his research on the flower of life and unlockings? Personally, I think that it's amazing when anyone, and this is just, keeping it real, it's amazing when anyone comes into their wake up process, especially those that are on different aspects of the consciousness where they can affect others. Sometimes we're looking for credentials, we're looking for a certain status quo, et cetera, to prove to us that what is being said is correct. I think we do that every day in this reality. Like, some may feel like their pastor is going to be the moral bearing for them. Some feel like their president is. Some feel like their parents are. Some feel like that they're the only ones that can do that. But of course, we take mentorships and we take advice from others, and we take that advice to heart. And I believe personally that Terrence Howard has the capability of doing that for all the people that have watched him through the first time of whoop that chick, all the way up to, some of the stuff going on in Empire and all of that. And then finally bringing all of that into this awareness that, okay, here's what my culmination from all of this has really been. So that's what I feel about it personally. I feel like that at any point that someone can become a conduit for the truth, because the truth is actually running through all of us. That's why a lot of us start actually saying the same things, even though we're not directly trying to repeat what another one is saying. I do also feel like that we do take sometimes notations from others, and we take that knowledge upon ourselves as our own. And I guess since it's all collective, okay, cool. Even though, I guess even ideas of copyright and things are all founded on this new structure. But overall, because, when we speak overall, rather than, nitpicking into the nucleus is about what we want each person to do and how we want them to do it as we come into a greater understanding. I think that anytime a person starts raising their consciousness from something that is base and normal into something that is expanded, then they have the full spectrum of being able to actually impact others that are also in that same space. And so, this is sometimes what I have to consistently remind myself of, especially when I see Mind Valley commercial. No, I'm joking. But anyway, anytime I see someone that is teaching what I feel like is like, I just got to say it like that, like, I also have to remember there are people that are at that exact level, but they're not always going to remain at that level. And that if we're all here like stepping stones for each person, they may start climbing up that way and then start eventually reaching more potentized knowledge. But if there's only the potent knowledge, or what people say is the absolute truth, I find that that'll probably be like something that people won't be able to break down and really understand. And so what we're all doing here is we're actually breaking down this knowledge and this awareness coming from the sun, if you may, and many of the lunar bodies, and also a lot of the stars in the cosmos. And we're bringing that through these receptacles, and we're actually beginning to dissect that in a way where others can chew on it and to eat it properly. So that's what I feel about that right now, today, 2019, what is it? It's Sunday, November 24th. So that's what's up. That's my status on that right now. So this next question is, are people experiencing war living out their ancestral karma, or are they just learning from a contrast to learn more about self? This is a great question, because I actually study war quite a bit. I think it's probably because genetically, I think there's some that are actually more of genetically disposition to warriors. And this could be also because, let's say when you grow up in a tribal setting, they're going to definitely single out the men that have a certain type of genetic thing. Maybe they're tall, maybe they're athletic build. You're going to go defend the tribe. And if that happens 5 or 6 generations, then it's just going to naturally feel like your thing is to defend the tribe. Okay. And then you're even going to find that you're kind of geared very well to do that, even genetically. So because of that, I often think about wars myself, and I think about people engaged in war. And in fact, my biggest contrast in this reality that I work to help me balance is actually war zones and people that are actually experiencing so much trauma, especially if I can't really harmonize with why they're experiencing that. Like, for instance, there's wars going on right now, even in Gaza. There's wars going on in Iran. There's sanctions. There's all this stuff. And then you see these, even the men that you see, men and women alike, and women and children. And then you see them experiencing this torrential nightmare going on with the external reality and war. And, rather than, trying to offer an actual answer to that, I only can give you a little bit of insight into what I think is actually going on. What I think is going on is that what our DNA, like as far as from our children, like from the time like we're like as a child, then our father, then his father and mother, their mother, etc., is that we're carrying this dinonucleic balance, okay? Like literally like a bank account. And that in each generation, it's like your mothers and fathers, and then it becomes your responsibility. Each generation, it becomes a responsibility to synthesize the experience, to actually weed out what is deceptive and what is distortion in the experience. And when we don't do that, then what happens is the next stage of our DNA inherits those imbalances, okay? And I believe that we can be misled by others suggesting to us, and I think that religion has done so much of this, it is the number one culprit of this, suggesting to us these levels of separations that exist on the highest level, i.e. that gods are not liking each other. My dad can whoop your dad, because that's really where it actually comes from, is that when you have tribal feuds, it's really family members, elders even, going at it with each other, and even some of them losing their lives. Like, my God is more powerful than your God, right? And then what this produces, because all of this is obviously the greatest stage of immaturities, is it produces these distortions like what you even see when people are praying to God about helping them destroy someone. Like you see people in Israel, help us, and we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and we ask for God to help us in our struggles and bringing, and it's like, whoa, buddy, stop. If you're praying to the God that you're saying is in this book that has all this power, and it's still wars and things going on, it would be common sense for you to understand that obviously that God is either not involved, or that concept of that God that you have is actually propelling that. But that's why common sense is not common when you are hypnotized. Religion, to me, is one of the greatest stages of hypnosis, because it works on the highest faculties of what you can perceive as being greater than self or a part of self. So this is also Islam alike. And so these two being locked into this war, and then the parents not really balancing it out, but perpetuating it, is spreading to the children on a nationwide level. And so this is what I feel like that war zones are consist of, is that this debt-based system where, oh, because you killed my uncle, even something that you don't even know happened, because you killed XYZ, now we have to act out this lifetime in war. And this also could happen even within things like slavery and things like, let's say, white versus black, and all these different things that keep one locked into this quarrel where one can literally say, I'm going to spend the rest of my life fighting this battle of basically trying to balance out this atrocity, when really to balance out an atrocity, you wouldn't be able to do it that way. You can't balance out atrocity by creating another atrocity. That's like what they call fighting fire with fire. You just set the whole thing ablaze. So I think that doesn't become as obvious when you're in heated battle, just like it doesn't become obvious when you're in an argument. Some people want to defend themselves. They don't want to actually use the technique that is going to bring the resolution. They just really want the other person to feel the pain that they experienced, or to feel the retribution, right? So that's what I feel personally is happening. And I feel like that it's happening on such a massive scale, it's become infective, because when you see someone else do something, then you also feel like you're entitled or even responsible for also doing it. And then I feel like that those who have removed themselves from that environment, but starting for digging deep first, which would be the religious tradition, many of the the so-called customs that have been learned that actually are not harmonic customs, when they start digging deep and removing that, they actually find themselves getting away out of those spaces altogether, whether that's they actually get accepted as refugees, if you may, into another country. That country is not so hostile. They start raising a family there. And now 2 or 3 generations later, they're not experiencing that type of war-like environment. And so that's what I believe personally is going on. I feel like that I could easily be, if I hadn't adapted a certain stage of my own level of awareness and adepthood, still in the hood, still at the meet and greets where, you know, they're talking about who the enemy is and all those different kind of things. And would that really propel me into the stage of consciousness that I would be my gift and my inheritance and my allotment? I wouldn't even really know anything about that. All I would know is this struggle. And I wouldn't even know how to get out of that struggle except for by using things that actually would entwine me deeper into that struggle. So that's what I feel like is going on. And yeah, I mean, this is an ode to everyone in realization that there's a lot of responsibility that goes on when you put a child into this world. And when you don't adhere to that responsibility, meaning you don't really realize that, hey, if you're teaching your child this and you haven't checked back and seen where the origin of this even is coming from, because that child is you, you're going to reap what you sow from what you are teaching, because that's how all of this has to work. So nothing is being done wrong. And that may sound wild to you, but that's exactly how it is. Nothing is really being done wrong because you're saying, I'm going to add 4 and 4, and the reality is going to give you 8. But you may be looking for 9. You may be looking for other numbers. You may be looking for another outcome, but that is not what you put into the computational system. And you can then even be trained. This is how you get to what you're looking for, even though there will be no examples. If not, there may be 1 or 2. In a place of 9 billion, there'll be 1 or 2 examples of somebody who was able to reach it that way. But for the masses, they won't be able to reach it that way. But that's what we say. Common sense ain't common. Hypnosis will prevail. Emotions will take over. And then one will be locked in and tied into this warlike loop that is also happening in the consciousness, because people that are polarized at times into these different fields, these ideals, politics, religion, all of that kind of stuff, they're extremely polarized. So these wars are also taking place in their consciousness. And then, like I said, someone throws fire onto it by killing an aunt, bombing a country. And this locks these forms of consciousness into a never-ending battle until someone decides, and many walk away from these battles one at a time. Until there's nobody standing on that battlefield, then those wars will continue. So this next question here is, and we're almost at that point. I think we're going to end up here at 10:50, which is about 10 minutes. We also have a giveaway, and we're going to give away 2 semesters of the Innerversity to those who are actually tuning in. If you would like to be entered into this giveaway, then all you need to do is type something into the chat box, like what's up, wholeness, anything, and then Nightbot will register you as an eligible user. And at that stage, then we'll go ahead and make sure that, you know, you're included in today's giveaway. So that's what's up on that. So I'm going to keep going with this. Can you remind us of the significance of 528 frequency and the precision required to benefit optimally? Okay, so 528 hertz in solfeggio is the center of the spectrum, which actually gives us the pattern that looks like the torus field. It also looks like the concave. It looks like the concave. Wow, what word am I looking for? Concave, convex. It's just a concave pattern. I guess that's all. It's a concave pattern. And what it is that the benefit of 528 hertz is just that. It's actually the center. It brings things actually into a harmonic field. Now, to use it optimally, though, because what I found is sound is not always the best carrier for frequencies, because sound can only penetrate to a certain level. So when you understand the properties of frequencies, you realize that actually if you times 528 hertz times 2, you actually get the same field ad infinitum. These are the octaves that you actually, when bumping frequencies up through math, properly, you get the same frequency, but on a different spectrum. So I only can speak about what we were doing is we were bumping the frequency up until it reached radio waves, a radio wave level. And then we were playing that frequency across devices that can play radio waves, which is pretty much any device that can cover that spectrum in the frequencies and hertz. And that had the ability to actually penetrate the body all the way down to a cellular level. And then, so what you would do is you would replicate this harmonic frequency or tone or spectrum into the body on a cellular level, which could actually cause regeneration in many areas that are actually showing entropy. So in conclusion here, it balances extremes, okay? Because some people were looking for it to make them fly off. And, you know, if that means that all of your system has come into balance and now you've inherited that, then that's what would happen. But technically, this is not to push your frequencies all the way into the higher spectrums. It's actually to harmonize frequencies and even take frequencies that are too high and bring them into the middle, and take frequencies that are too low and bring them into the middle and actually create balance. So this is why many people that use the 528 hertz, because even the sound does help, sometimes they don't feel like that they got the benefits that they thought they were going to get from 528 hertz because they were thinking that, hey, this is going to take me into a whole nother planetary system. When really, once your consciousness is brought into balance, if that balance equals that your vehicle is capable of doing that, then that's where you would go. But if that balance just means that you would be removing dis-ease, meaning extreme systems, extreme frequencies that are in the body and in the organs, then that's actually what would happen. And then you would benefit from that feeling. And that feeling could often be just calm. It could often be contentment in a certain way that, okay, you know, I feel like that I'm harmonized with the reality around me. It could ease you when you're experiencing things like an argument and then you got all this anxiety. So that's really the use of 528 hertz. I mean, there's a plethora of other uses, but that's what it's doing. It's not raising the frequency into this high spectrum to where you can glide across stuff, but it will correct the frequencies and put them into the center. And if that correction means that your consciousness is at that stage, then that's what you'll inherit. And I said that quite a few times that way. And it's because that we develop consciousness over time, space, distance. We're developing and creating and honing in our consciousness. And 528 hertz becomes a way to actually harmonize this consciousness that we've been developing and honing in, to bring some normalism to it. Because when you begin as a neophyte, all you're really trying to do, and I can definitely say this from experience, is raise the frequency as high as they could go. And that's even sometimes the norm. It's like high alkaline, eat only this, do only this. And then you raise the frequencies up, but then you cause these extremes where either you fall down as equally as you rose it high, or you zap yourself into a completely foreign field and put your whole consciousness into shock. And many of the other things that come along with raising the body into higher frequencies. Of course, there's pros to it. You get your eyes open really fast. You become aware of things that you weren't aware of at all. It becomes a shocker. It can jar you from other, especially lower polarities that you can be stuck in. So there's many benefits. But ultimately, what the adept is doing is actually harmonizing all the frequencies, because we're looking to do this infinitely. So somebody who, like a high frequency, runs off really fast is going to get tired really fast. Someone who never even starts running and lethargic and lazy is never going to get anywhere. Someone who's running at an optimal pace can do that pretty much infinitely and actually is experiencing more of an imbalance, and also being aware of the things going on around them. Because if you're raising your frequency really high and there's others that are around you, including animals and insects, that can't handle those frequencies, then you make it uncomfortable for them. And then, of course, if your frequency is too low and then you have others that are around you that are not, on that spectrum, then you can actually pull them down and drain them. So truly what you're looking for is you're looking for that balance, because what the balance does is it's also a big instructor. So 528 hertz also is a great instructor. Hydrogen is also a great instructor. And what these instructors do is they say basically to things around them, look at me. Look how I feel. I'm balanced. You may want to inherit this. You may want to do this. So even somebody that's way up there is like, I really rather be balanced. And something that's down there says, I feel like that is more attainable for me than that up there. And that's how we bring things into balance. So we got 3 more minutes. Let's see. Okay, so I see I think we've reached, well, there's quite a few questions, but these questions will be for next week. It does work out great for me to actually have questions that we can roll into. There's probably about 8 or 9 questions, maybe even 10 here. And so we'll get to them. And also we want to let you know, even though Real Search is being worked on, I think it did have a little bug, and we're debugging it now, so it should be up soon. But if you go to the website that you can actually find, on the right panel, and obviously we're working on the website all the time. We're finally getting the search in, but it's still a little buggy, so we're still working on it. But if you go to the right menu on the website, you click it, you'll get to what's called Real Search. And what you're capable of doing is you're capable of searching Real Search based on the keywords of the questions that you have to ask me. And Real Search right now is searching through all of my knowledge that I feel like were my high points as far as the videos that I made in the past. And so if you're looking for things like more knowledge on Kundalini, you can search Real Search for that keyword Kundalini, and you'll get lots more information about it. And you'll basically get every single video that I said Kundalini, which will shorten the amount of time that it takes you to get through my material. Because I know some have said that, these 3-hour recordings at times, they're impossible, especially what goes on today. However, this is a perfect way, and some say also I skip around a lot. It's just me. I deliver it the way that I do. I don't think that anything is wrong with it. I can't inherit that disposition. But what I can offer is I can offer something that will allow you to pour through that information a lot more easier and precisely to get what you're looking for. So let's do a giveaway. Let's go ahead and do some giveaways. In fact, I'm going to give away 2 universities, and I'm going to give away 1 bottle of 15 grams of She Legit to Quit. And that's what we're going to do today. So let me see here. Let me get Nightbot booted up. And then also let me get some, let me get this screen share happening. Also, I wanted to say thank you to the moderators that were jumping in today and assisting with this call. All the pillars in the tribe. I mean, wow, we've been at this for years now, and still keeping it real, like still bringing this knowledge and actually doing it even unapologetically, constantly learning, not staying in the stigmas, the isms, like this is, the only thing that I have and the only thing that I'm doing. I have a feeling that next week there's probably going to be more questions about the diet thing, since we've already brought up veganism being in question and vegetarianism being in question. That's the topic that we're also covering in ambassador training right now. We're taking a deep dive into diets, and in realizing that we actually should be more seasonal with how we're consuming food, and that we should actually not be polarizing ourselves or getting caught up into dogmas and isms, and how that could be directly used against us, and how it actually would put us in a stage of health that will actually be less optimal. So you can even jump into a diet thinking that it's going to actually assist you in becoming more strong and more healthy. But then you have to also realize that there's real knowledge around these diets that could really say that, hey, this diet is really more for cleansing, and you're not going to feel as physically as strong as you keep cleansing yourself and as you keep removing different bacterias and all this kind of stuff. While this diet could be more fattening, so that way you have the strength to be able to stay in it with everyone, because you would have a better ground. And that each person, because we're actually in these different climates and we're also in these different skin suits at times, we have a dosha that's actually different, then we're to begin to use knowledge that allows us to calibrate a seasonal approach to what exactly we're putting inside of our mouth. And that hence the term why you call seasons for food seasoning, because it's to change this food's taste. However, we need to be doing that on a real level, actually changing the types of food that we're eating based on the actual season that we're in. So that's what we're covering right now in ambassador training. It's proving to be very instrumental, especially as we're driving into 2020 and getting ourselves ready for this experience that we're going to have. We're never in the same space. It's important to remember that how the cosmos is moving, there's so much uniqueness happening, and all of us are on board here. We're never in the same space. So this means that we have to prepare like a captain, and this is what we were talking about. A captain plots their course using the stars before they take off in the big boat. Okay, and each of us are riding in very elaborate craft, very elaborate systems, these bodies are. And they're better than your iPhones, better than any of the technologies. Even the quantum systems that are being invented are only mimicking the body. And because of that, and having that, and being responsible for that, you also have to, one, take mentorship from nature, because nature is the body, the planet is the body. See how nature is handling things, because the body has seasons and is seasonal and is temperamental. Realize that you can't polarize yourself. You're not the North Pole. You're not the South Pole, really. You want to, I mean, you're not just the North Pole and the South Pole. You really want to be on the equator. And then realizing just how much power you have in balance, because even from common sense, anytime there's something that happens on one extreme or happens on another extreme, you can get into those easier to actually cause resolutions if you're sitting in the center. But if you're already on this side and you need to be way over there, it's going to be so much more difficult to make that journey, that most of the time, once you get there, the problem is already going to be either too great for you to be able to overcome, or it's going to be no longer in existence to where you can see what exactly happened. So we want to remain in the center of our consciousness. It's the best stage of logistics, and we need to use common sense these days, especially with all of these Instagrammers and the selfies and the, you know, I'm doing this, it makes me better, and all this going on, because that's, of course, what I promise to do here, especially with this community and those that listen to my message, is to keep it harmonic and balanced, keep us growing, keep us experiencing. And I'm not going to compromise that for things like status quo reputations and all these other things that we build up that really fall when the truth stands in. So let us stay with truth and actually continuously grow. So the giveaway begins. Here we go. So first, we're going to give away one semester of the university of your choosing. That would be either semester 1 or semester 2. And in order to redeem this, then you will go to the bottom right corner of the site. Let me show that to you right now. Maybe somebody will recommend our site to Webby Awards. I think it looks amazing. Actually, I'm logged in. Let me log out real quick. Or it'll be here too. Should pop up here in a moment. Oh, there it is. Like I said, this is the one day that that is not there. So down here on the bottom corner, let me squeeze my screen in because I see that you have it there. So right down here in the bottom corner, this is support. So if you win today, just hit us up in here and say, hey, I won this. You know, give us your first name, last name. If it's something that needs to be delivered, like the She Legit, give us your address, and then give us your YouTube title so that we can go ahead, or your YouTube channel name, and so we can verify it, and then we'll get that out to you. And then also, if you win a course, just give us your name, your email address, and we'll get you set up properly. Also, you can gift this course. If you have this course already, you already are a subscriber to the university, you can gift this course to one of your friends, and that means you would just give us their information. So also, that right menu that I was talking about is here, and Real Search is being worked on. I know one of our developers kind of that really works on this. He was out this week. So, you know, maybe I click on that. I'll have like what Tesla had when he tried to break the window on the big truck this week, and they didn't, you know, over tested the whole thing. So that's where Real Search is. Hopefully it's working right now, but it should be within the next 48 hours. So let's get the rolling happening here. And here we go. So we're going to roll it, and it's Jack Berryman. Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations, congratulations. Also, you are now going to the university, my guy. So definitely hit us up in the bottom of the chat and on the site and the support, and we'll get that course. Let us know if you want semester 1 or semester 2. You can actually check out which semester contains what by just jumping into the site, into the store, and going under courses and actually checking out semester 1 and semester 2. There's a syllabus there. That means that we let you know everything that we're going to talk about inside this course. And so some things may appeal to you more than others. So you can do that. So let's hit it again. This time we're going to give away that 15 grams of She Legit. Let's roll it again. Bada bing, bada boom. That goes to Daniel Draws. That's what's up. Wholeness. You've actually been able to accomplish getting a bottle of She Legit 85 plus minerals in fulvic acid and humic acid, which is perfect to break down those nutrients, break down those minerals so the body can turn them into the proper nutrients. And that's what it is. So that's for you. Definitely contact us on the bottom of the site, and we'll see you. And last but not least, let's see who we got. Balanced Vibes. What's up? What's up, my brother? Looks like you going to the university too. Unless you have it already. If you want to give it to someone else, then that will work. But that is what it is. So today we've given away 2 semesters of the university. And we've also given away a bottle of 15 gram She Legit. We welcome everybody to check out the store if you're looking for what I feel like is the best products online right now as far as getting you holistically in the right solutions for yourself and your consciousness. And then, as I said, if you're looking for that direct mentorship, jump into Ambassador Training, and boy, it's always happening in there. We're on sync, we're live, we're a tribe, we connect daily, we're there with the live chat. It's really a treat. And if you're actually in the position right now, though, and it's been a little tough for you financially, or you feel like that you can't really make the commitment right now, you're not excluded. We have specialist training ready for you. It's free. There's a lot of value there. We put our hard work, time, energy, and everything into the same essence that we put into everything else. And so you can begin to dial in sovereignty, especially before 2020, by taking those courses. And you'll find that on the course page also on the site under specialist training. So, Wholeness and Balance Vibrations Tribe, thank you so much for tuning in. It's always been real. Sending lots of love to everybody as we keep flowing through this. And I look forward to next week with all those beautiful questions that are coming through. And also, if anything was said today that didn't resonate with you, always remember that it's a smorgasbord. Take what's going to benefit you, leave the rest. And also, if there was something that was offensive that was said, remember it wasn't personal. If it offended you, then all is self. So that meant that I would feel offended that you were offended because you're taking it the wrong way. I'm here doing this with love. I actually spend my hard work and time and energy. I could be anywhere. I could be doing anything, but this is what I feel like is most optimal for my life and my path. Now, I've been here for 10 years. I'm not going anywhere in relation to leaving people and leaving them behind and all that, but I am constantly going to another stage in my exploration of my own consciousness. And in that, I'm also exploring your consciousness too. Me and you are the same wholeness.